Okay, please join us on stage. And now, may I hand over to the able hands of Mariam Wardak, our moderator for this session. Mariam, over to you.
Thank you, Thanabi. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, congratulations to everyone on the success of today's full Yerevan dialogue, and welcome to the last and very most important discussion on the critical role of intercultural dialogue in navigating our increasingly turbulent global landscape. Our panel will highlight the importance of protecting cultural heritage and how it contributes to building a culture of peace and nonviolence. Today, we have a distinguished group of experts with us who will bring a wealth of knowledge from their respective fields, and I'm excited to introduce them to you. First, we are honored to have His Excellency Mr. Miguel Moratinos, the UN Under-Secretary General and High Representative for Alliance of Civilizations. He has had a distinguished career in diplomacy, including serving as Spain's Foreign Minister and EU Special Representative for Middle East Peace Process. He has a statement he has prepared today, which he will inaugurate our discussion with.
Good afternoon or good evening, my dear friend, excellencies, distinguished guests. This is the last session, but I think it's the most important session. So thank you for the people who have the patience to wait for this panel. I want to first read a statement. Some friends are here. They know me, I don't like to read a statement myself, because I prefer to have an interactive session, more open. But my responsibility, trying to help both countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, asked me to really prepare something that can contribute to this way for peace and reconciliation. And traditional diplomats, today diplomats are different, we know that each word counts. Each message has its importance. So, as one I'm going to read is what I think could be helpful for the collective desire of all of us, is as Prime Minister of Armenia have presented to us that Armenia is ready for peace, so we have to have this peace in the front of our common engagement. So, I want to warmly thank His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Armenia, Mr. Ararat Mirzoyan, for his kind invitation, and I extend my congratulations to the government of Armenia for the launch of this first iteration of Yerevan dialogue. It gives me a great pleasure to be back in Yerevan, fantastic city, beautiful city, endowed with a rich history and a culture that embodies the nature of the Silk Road for the distinct traditions and unique art form that had blended Western and Oriental civilization over the course of centuries. My dear friend, while the global scene as we see it today often brings desperation, there is also a reason to have hope for a better future. Learning that Armenia and Azerbaijan are getting closer to a peace agreement was and is very encouraging. The agreement between the State Commission of Armenia and Azerbaijan reached early in April this year on the delimitation of the border was a positive step in the right direction. I sincerely hope that other outstanding issues should be soon resolved to achieve a full-fledged peace agreement. For that important step, I commend the leadership of both countries for the wisdom, courage, and for mastering political will. My dear friend, excellencies, as the theme of this session suggests, our world is divided. There are many reasons underlying his fragmentation. Nonetheless, there is no justification to surrender to this status quo. As we live in an increasingly multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual society, multiculturalism, diversity, and pluralism should be the foundation of our society. Dialogue is the bridge builder that interlinks them all together. Dialogue serves as one of the soft power tools for conflict prevention and conflict resolution. It's a tool that sadly is often overlooked and remains largely underfunded. We spend too much money in military expenditure and military budget. How much we spend in peace effort, in diplomacy? Put your question within yourself. Distinguished guests, when we think of the future, I ask myself, what exactly is our vision of the society of the future? What kind of society we are going to live through? It is a society of segregated communities, marked at best by the coexistence of majority. Coexistence is a good word, but it's a negative word. I have to coexist with my neighbor, but I hate him. I don't like him, but I have to coexist. So we'll build this society of majorities and minorities with different and equal rights and responsibility, loosely bound together by mutual ignorance of each other and fostered by stereotypes? Or, on the contrary, we try to have a vibrant, inclusive, and just society with equal rights and responsibility, no minorities, equal rights, citizenship for every single citizen, the same right, no majorities, minorities, equal rights for everybody, or one that upholds human rights and protects the dignity of all its citizens. I'm a true believer in dialogue rather than monologue. As we are talking about multiculturalism, I would stress that intercultural dialogue offers a forward-looking model for managing cultural diversity. That approach allows us to prevent ethnic, religious, linguistic, and cultural divide. It enables us to move forward together, to deal with our different identity constructively on the basis of shared universal values. Dialogue, my friends, transforms relations among communities affected by conflict, and it rebuilds trust that former enemies can envision and realize a shared future. It is the first step in a long process towards confidence-building measures. Dialogue across culture, religion, civilization is the platform of United Nations Alliance of Civilization that continues to advocate not only because it's our mandate and mission, but because we believe that it's an imperative for sustainable peace. Nonetheless, intercultural dialogue cannot be stipulated by law or by decree. Intercultural competencies are taught and learned when the right and safe space is provided. Through dialogue, we foster a culture of peace, a way of life to bring social cohesion, mutual understanding, and mutual respect. United Nations Alliance on Civilization, UNAO, continues to be committed to creating opportunities for intercultural and interreligious dialogue, and expanding platforms for community engagement with a wide range of stakeholders, including religious leaders, representatives of civil society organizations, youth, women, academia, media professionals, and the business community. It is important to remind ourselves of the common human values embedded in diverse civilizations from east, west, north, and south. Civilizations are built around complexity, elements, heritage, architecture, historical sites, urban center, culture, tradition, unique art, including wine, like last night. That's also civilization. I'm very proud to be an Armenian, to have the opportunity to drink such fantastic wine. A true dialogue is one that integrates all these elements together. So, my dear friend, we may agree or we may disagree that the current political scene is dark and chaotic. The global order is in disorder. War and conflict continue to rage in different corners of the world. Polarization has reached dangerous heights. Hate speech, xenophobia, religious intolerance are surging. Disinformation and deepfake are fueled to the raging fire of anger. Vulnerable communities are being demonized and dehumanized, especially on account of their religion, belief, ethnicity, or gender. All this fuels hatred, triggers fear, and drives wedge between communities. Distinguished friend, the mission of the United Nations Alliance of Civilization rests in addressing the root causes of polarization and radicalization and providing a counter-narrative of racism, xenophobia, Christianophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, as well as other hatred and religious intolerance. I wish to emphasize that at a time when conflicts are fueling political tension, it must be recalled that such tension never justifies expression of identity-based hatred. That toxic hate that incites to violence, to attack on the individual, on the destruction of the religious side, and diminish society. Hatred brings the world's humanity impulses. What is even more challenging is that this manifestation of hate and bigotry are often literated by political and religious leaders to serve their agenda. It's our collective responsibility to stand up and speak out against all forms of hate based on religion, belief, ethnicity, or gender. That's why United Nations Alliance of Civilization developed the Plan of Action for Safeguarding Religious Sites in 2019. The plan underscored the universality and sanctity of religious sites, preserving religious sacred sites, and ensure safe and free access to this site is a prerequisite for lasting peace. While the protection and preservation of religious sites is the prime responsibility of member states, it is important to reiterate that religious sacred sites represent the heart and soul of any community. Vandalizing or desecrating those sites cut deep into this community, triggering anger that could lead to violence. As this region emerges from decades of conflict, the preservation of religious sites belonging to religious communities across the faith spectrum is imperative to bring sustainable peace to the region. I commit myself, my dear friend, to stand ready with my office to offer whatever support is needed to that death, and that's what I conveyed to the Armenian authorities today in my bilateral talks. In this context, UNOSC will convene the Global Conference Safeguarding Religious Sites during the 10th Global Forum in Cascais, Portugal, from 25-27 November 2024. A conference is in implementation of one of the recommendations of the United Nations Plan of Action for Safeguarding Religious Sites, and it will bring together member states and religious leaders in what we hope will be a constructive discussion on the protection of religious sites. As well, I have been following with deep concern the incursion and attack on the Armenian quarter of Old Jerusalem, endangering the Armenian Christian community in Old Jerusalem and destroying the property belonging to the Armenian Patriarchate. Excellencies, distinguished guests, as a politician, I only know too well that history and politics are often embroiled in long conflict, further aggravating their complexities and prolonging this conflict. They bring pain, grief, and despair in all parties to the conflict. Peace doesn't mean the absence of war. It's especially important to remember that during peacetime, there is a potential for open and frank dialogue. I conclude with a call to commit to dialogue to transform relations among communities affected by conflict and rebuild trust so that former enemies can envision and realize a shared future. Dialogues pave the way for true reconciliation, to moving from a divided past toward a better future. Armenia is ready, as the screen in the opening session highlighted this morning. This is the time to rebuild trust and restore confidence. Let's not waste this precious moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Undersecretary. Mr. Moratinos, it was an excellent framework for all of the panelists to dive into with their expertise. Next, we are joined by the former Prime Minister of Tunisia, Mehdi Jomaa. He led the country through its democratic transition in 2014. His political career began as Tunisia's Minister of Industry, where he initiated key energy and industrial reforms. He also founded the think tank Tunisia Alternatives. Honorable Prime Minister, given your leadership during Tunisia's democratic transition and your efforts in fostering economic reforms, how do you see the role of intercultural dialogue in bridging cultural divides and promoting tolerance, especially in today's turbulent global landscape? Additionally, could you share your thoughts on the importance of protecting cultural heritage?
Yeah, I will maybe start to remind that period because you will see we can find an answer to all the questions or a sense of all the questions that we are asking today about multilateralism, the role of intercultural cultural dialogue, and your question about preserving the heritage. In that period, just to remind you, it was the post-revolution, what we called the Arabic Spring, which was a big seism in the region with the change of regimes, with big social and sometimes violent movements, and which was followed by the terrorism. And when it arrived at that, because there was big trouble in the region with the war in Libya, war in Syria, and as well in Tunisia, it was a period of big political confrontation between the different political currents, and it was in the street. And through the dialogue, we succeeded to solve some issues. But here, what I have to say about the multiculturalism, this big wave created a big misunderstanding, because Tunisia was the epicenter, or was the starting of this change in the region, and it was between two different or two big different worlds, between Europe, the Occidental world, and between the Oriental till the Gulf countries and the other Arab countries, and maybe more and beyond. And no one was understanding what is happening. Is it violence? Is it terrorism? Is it democratic change? Is it that? And really, the multicultural dialogue, which consists of explaining the differences, explaining and helping people to have the right standard to understand what is happening in this particular country, it was mandatory because everyone was scaring. It's a big change. We don't know what happens in the future. And with this wave of terrorism, there was many reluctance, many resistance to understand that. And really, to understand, to explain the difference, the cultural difference, the way people are reacting, and then to go through the dialogue with using not the hard power and try to break this movement, but the diplomacy, the soft power of the diplomacy was mandatory to explain to our environment and to make all the people collaborating to stop what is the risk of the terrorism, but to help making this transition as soft as possible. So, and then even when you see inside the country, we were at the point of a general confrontation, but as well, we were under the influence of other culture, extreme culture, and we were under the big wave of terrorism. It was mandatory to focus as well and to remind our cultural heritage, because as you know, Tunisia, it's berceau, how to say berceau? Moratinos? Berceau. For the baby, you know. Okay, it's a difficult English travel. It's a travel of many civilizations from Carthage to Rome, after the Arabo-Islamic civilization, and we have a lot of heritage, many monuments, many tangible and non-tangible, and it was really the way to explain to people and to their identity, their differences, and to explain to them that in our history, we succeeded and we became great, we became a civilization, and we became contributor of the civilization where there was dialogue, where there was the recognition of the other, when there was a trust between us. And if there is something that helped Tunisia to go in a soft transition after, it's that heritage, the identity, because the cultural heritage, it helps in the difficult periods to build the identity and to attract people about a common target. But we have to pay attention not to create chauvinism or to create other issue by creating the identity. It's good for internal build-up, but we have to pay attention and to believe that all the other people has their own identity, has their own culture, has their own specificity, has their own strengths, and has a lot of lessons and a lot of things to contribute and to give to the other humanity. So I think that that period was really fantastic, giving a concrete example of what we are defending today and good arguments from the ground.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It was a great addition to what Undersecretary said. There are a few words that I'd like to point out where he mentioned no justifications. You pointed out a few words: misunderstanding, clarity, reaction, and identity. And I think that our next speaker will also touch upon this. Our third panelist is Nikola Stojanovic, the current State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. With his extensive experience in foreign policy, advising, and leadership, the Honorable State Secretary's insight will help shed light on how small states can leverage intercultural dialogue to enhance security diplomatic relations. Honorable State Secretary, with your expertise in international relations, navigating diverse political landscape, how do you see the role of intercultural dialogue in addressing today's global challenges?
Thank you very much. I would like to speak on behalf of Serbia, first theoretically, that we consider intercultural dialogue as the backbone of creating an efficient and effective global multilateral order capable of resolving issues, addressing issues, and trying to deal with the challenges which are proliferating every day. But more concretely, speaking from the perspective of current affairs of Serbia, I would like to outline how, on the one hand, existence of multicultural or intercultural dialogue immediately yields positive effects to peace and stability, economic returns, and generally speaking, positive outcomes. And on the other hand, how lack of dialogue has completely opposite effects, undermines peace and stability, undermines economic growth, and the creation of additional divisions in the region of Balkans. So I'm going to start with the negative example and lack of dialogue. As you might know, Belgrade, as the capital of central Serbia, has engaged in dialogue with Pristina, Kosovo and Metohija as of 2013 with a goal to normalize relations. This dialogue has, over the last 11 years, at first yielded some agreements and positive outcomes. But unfortunately, over the last 3 years, the authorities in Pristina have completely abandoned or renounced a dialogue as a mechanism to try to normalize relations and overcome urgent issues. Instead of dialogue, they have opted for unilateral measures, such as indiscriminate attempts to arrest local leaders, ethnically Serbs. They have from institutional point of view, incited hatred and ethnic tensions, leading to a lot of ethnic incidents which are never prosecuted. They have, in addition to that, attacked different institutions providing different sorts of services. They have attacked hospitals, they have attacked schools, they have sent police forces to close pharmacies, they have closed banks so people cannot receive pensions, salaries, they have completely banned the use of local currency, and as a result there is a proliferating attacks on cultural institutions, proliferating attacks on religious institutions, and overall attempts to eradicate local ethnic Serbian community from the territory of Kosovo and Metohija. So what's the effect of lack of dialogue? Immediately we see undermining of regional peace and stability, speaking about wider region. Immediately we see the reaction of international community that has put sanctions on Pristina for renouncing dialogue. Immediately we have seen questioning the perspectives of economic growth in that part of Serbia. So at the end of the day, we also see the increasing gap between different ethnic communities and overall increasing tensions in that region. So that's an example how lack of dialogue immediately creates a very negative effects. On the other hand, I'll use another example or another story from Serbia's current foreign policy, which shows that more dialogue or more global focus on multilateralism immediately yields positive results. So Serbia has, over the last year, fought diplomatically to win a bid to host Specialized Expo Exhibition 2027. After a lot of diplomatic efforts, we have managed to do so, so we will be hosting in Belgrade this grand event in 2027. The theme of the event is Play for Humanity, Music and Sports for All. Very non-political topic, but universal enough to attract different cultures, to attract different countries to be in Belgrade in 2027. And what's the immediate result of trying to proliferate platforms for multicultural dialogue in our region? The immediate effect is basically that we have more focus of the government on infrastructure and economy. We have more interest of foreign direct investments to invest in Serbia, but not just Serbia, to invest in the wider region, in the touristic sector of neighboring countries that are also going to benefit from increased inflow of tourists coming to Expo. Also, we have immediate effect to the peace and stability in the region as focus on the economy immediately spills over to the political sphere. Moreover, hosting of Expo has forced us as the country to engage globally, to learn about the issues which are relevant for regions such as Pacific, such as Caribbean, and to see how issues in such distant and different regions in some way do also manifest in the Western Balkans region. So these two stories basically show in a very concrete examples how existence of dialogue immediately yields positive effects and has positive effects on local communities, and how, on the other hand, lack of dialogue, something that we should avoid, immediately creates tensions, lowers economic prospects, and creates divisions among different ethnic communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful examples, and we're going to come back to you on how we can foster understanding. We're going to go to our next panelist, Mr. Joshi, who holds expertise in upstream economics, over 25 years in Indian Administrative Service, where he held senior roles in energy and environment, and he is now the chairman of the Observe Research Foundation. Mr. Joshi, it's natural to wonder what someone with a background in energy is doing on a panel focused on multiculturalism, but in this polarized world we find ourselves in today, perhaps you can help us power up these cultural exchanges and generate fresh ideas on bridging divides, and provide an example of future frameworks as well.
Thank you, Mariam. You asked me what is a person like me doing on a panel on multiculturalism. Probably to, with my energy background, bring some energy into the discussion on multiculturalism. But to be on a more serious note, we live in toxic times. We live in times where we've seen everything being weaponized. We've seen information being weaponized. We've seen our very connectivity being weaponized. We've seen financial flows being weaponized with disastrous consequences to both the flow of energy and raising questions to the future of this planet, because take it or leave it, the fact is that global discussions on any issue, such as climate change, such as how poverty is to be eradicated, how the SDGs are going to move forward, ultimately hinges on that one fundamental question: how much is geopolitics going to interfere with global markets? Economies and politics, these seem to be completely living in two parallel universes. And that is what really brings me to a panel like this. What do I mean by living in toxic times? Toxic times are times when there are few takers for multiculturalism. The national discourse is fragmented. That is what gives rise to xenophobia. That gives rise to these brands of nationalism which you see across the world. And these times actually are times for witch hunts. They're times for inquisitions. And we have our own, we don't burn our witches on the stake anymore. We have Twitter. We roast them on Twitter. We use social media to run campaigns and probably consign them to a fate worse than death, the people we do not like. Now, these are the toxic times that we find ourselves living in. Now, from these, how do we get back? We keep on saying we live in divided times. We talk about the divide between the East and the West. We talk about the bamboo curtain. We talk about the iron curtain. We've been talking today about the divide between the North and the South. The real divides are not out there. The real divides are here. They're in our minds. They're in our hearts. And that is where they need to be addressed. And this is not, we can keep on blaming technology, but sorry, this is not a new space. We have been here before. Civilizations have been through this, and civilizations have fought back against this. Now you're living in the Roman, all empires have clashed here. The Ottoman empires have all clashed here, they've flourished here, and they've crashed here also. They've dissipated, they've gone away. But something survives through all of this. And that is what wonders at when one comes to a place like Yerevan. You have the Matadadaran. You have this wonderful repository, which today preserves, even today, preserves ancient texts dating back to the 5th century from Greece. There are many texts, Grecian texts, which got burnt in the Library of Alexandria centuries ago, which are only available in the Armenian translation. That is how knowledge, that is how culture has been preserved by civilization all along, not by empires. And that is the job of people. It is not the job of nations, it is not the job of armies, it is the job of each and every one of us. This is always how civilization has progressed. This is how trade has grown. When we say we are the center of trade, trade did that. Trade is what existed in these, along these routes. And that is what led to the growth of culture, the growth of civilizations, the multiculturalism which we are so proud of, which even today you can see at the Carthaginian Center. And it houses sculpture from all over the world. You have Botero sitting there, the old woman, the woman smoking a cigar, you have the cat, and it shocks you. You engage with it, and you start asking questions. Is this real? Can this be true? And those questions we need to ask ourselves, each and every one ourselves. We need to ask our rulers, we need to ask basically this bipolarity we have shrunk into. We keep on saying we're in a divided world. What is a divided world? A divided world thinks in black and white. It thinks in bipolar arrangements. Bipolarity is a disease, is a disorder. It needs to be treated. We need to get out of this. So this is fundamentally what I want to say. I'm so glad this dialogue is taking place in the city of Yerevan. It is taking place in Armenia. It is taking place in one of the countries which has been the birthplace of culture and civilization, which it has carried in this very multi-layered identity. You know, you travel around, you don't even know where one layer ends. All these empires I'm talking about, they exist here. in your architecture, in your artwork, in your buildings, in your minds. It all exists here. It is all part of you. This is what we are. And this is what all civilizations are. So that is multiculturalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. I really appreciated the points of two parallel universe, the rawness of toxic times, the evolution of political civilization, and responsibilities of individuals. I'm hopeful that maybe together we'll find a way to move past these charged atmospheres that we're all navigating. Now, I would like to move to our fifth panelist, Ms. Sosi Tatikan, Senior Advisor on Foreign and Security Policy and member of the UN Security Sector Reform Advisory Network. She's a diplomat with expertise in Armenia's relationship with NATO, the IAEA, and Iran. Ms. Tatikan, how do you see the impact of the current challenges to multilateralism on Armenia? As for a country positioned in a conflict-prone region, how intercultural dialogue can help the region achieve conflict resolution and sustainable peace?
Thank you very much, Mariam. And I am very flattered to be in this distinguished panel with these very impressive speakers. I'll try to combine my two backgrounds before I became an independent advisor. The first one is an Armenian diplomacy and the second UN peacekeeping. So what I saw while I was an Armenian diplomat was that unfortunately years of negotiations around the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh were not leading to a peace agreement. Then when I went to the UN peacekeeping, I saw this liberal human rights-based order. I worked in Kosovo, I worked in East Timor and several African countries, and I saw how UN peacekeeping was helping small countries or unrecognized territories in crisis, how they would prevent genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity through deployment of large peacekeeping missions and stabilization and reconciliation. However, I was really frustrated that none of that was happening in this region. Everything was kind of regionalized. And unfortunately, attempts of conflict resolution apparently didn't bring any result. And it's possible to talk for hours why it didn't happen, but it was also a demonstration of the failure of international mediation, peace building, and peacekeeping. And then what we saw was that Azerbaijan started a war in 2020, and even after the military victory, it started this weaponization of everything that the distinguished Mr. Joshi mentioned, and taking advantage of Russia's war in Ukraine and absolutization of the notion of the territorial integrity in that context, and undermining of other human rights-based principles. It continued creeping ethnic cleansing and a weaponization of energy and food and humanitarian aid. And throughout 3 years, it achieved full ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh from their ancestral land. And moreover, after using military power to do so, it also resorted to soft power. I really agree that prevention is better than cure. That's why this crisis in international peacekeeping that we see currently, in light of the geopoliticization of UN Security Council, difficulty to adopt resolutions to deploy new peacekeeping missions or extend the existing peacekeeping missions, is sometimes, I think, maybe it's better to prevent the conflicts rather than to intervene in crisis. That's understandable. At the same time, we also see this weaponization of soft power as well, and that's disturbing when, you know, after proceeding to military power, certain states try to legitimize and normalize the use of military force, and they proceed to tools like lawfare, contestation of human rights-based international law, or they proceed to cognitive warfare, or disinformation campaigns and historical revisionism and competition of victimization, and finally, destruction of cultural heritage. When after conquesting a territory, the cultural heritage in that territory is destructed in order to erase the tracks of a particular ethnic group, and then to claim that that ethnic group was not even indigenous and was almost like illegal migrant in their indigenous ancestral land. So I actually have questions myself as a security and political advisor, how intercultural dialogue can contribute to remedying this situation. And I believe that this warfare of strategic narratives can be really managed quite well through intercultural dialogue, and transformation of narratives and this competition of ethnic hatred and Armenophobia or Islamophobia. It depends on the region where the given conflict is generated. And while you can use identity politics to escalate conflicts, you can also use identity politics in order to de-escalate conflicts and understand each other narratives and transform the conflict. However, it shouldn't become a way to refuse and contest international human rights-based order, but rather really aim to remedy, to prevent the relapse into the conflict and to achieve sustainable peace agreements, which means positive peace versus coerced and illiberal peace.
Thank you, Ms. Tatikan, for that thorough explanation of your realism, especially highlighting that at times conflict resolution didn't bring results. I think this is something that we're going to come back to, especially with your solution base. And now we have Dr. Elke Selter, Program Director at ALIF in Switzerland, brings over 20 years of international experience in heritage protection during emergencies. She holds a PhD in politics and international studies from SOAS, University of London. Dr. Selter, given your expertise in heritage protection in conflict areas, how do you view the role of intercultural dialogue in safeguarding cultural heritage amid global instability?
Thank you, and thanks for having ALIF here. Maybe ALIF requires a little bit of explanation what we are, because I assume this is not our regular target public. We are a foundation. ALIF is the International Alliance for the Protection of Culture in Conflict Areas, but it's not an abbreviation, it's the first letter of the Arab and Hebrew alphabets, which is what we've been named after. We're an international foundation based in Geneva, and we're a public-private partnership, so we have member states as well as a number of private institutions that finance us. And we're primarily a financial tool, but also a technical, we do provide technical advice whenever that is needed. We were created in 2017 by France and the UAE. Those were our first member states. Since then, that has grown. After you had this big wave of heritage destructions in Syria and Iraq, but also in Mali and so on, and there was a feeling internationally that there was a need within the sector for a more, let's say, lean, more responsive, faster responsive system than the organizations that we had, like UNESCO, for example. UNESCO is on our board, so there's an extremely tight relation, but so the idea was to create something that's very closely linked, but that could potentially respond faster. That at the same time also had more funds at its disposition right away to be able to act. In 2018, we started adopting our first projects, and now, 6 years later, we're supporting around 450 projects in 37 different countries around the world, all of them either in situations of very active conflicts or various stages of what you could call post-conflict. Now, how do we go about this, and how is this linked to dialogue, peace, which are all these very nice terms that we put onto what we do? But I think, first of all, and perhaps being based in Switzerland helps, but we try to take a neutral approach to culture heritage. And I know I have a background in politics, and I don't believe culture heritage in and of itself is ever neutral. But what we do try to do in the way in which we approach our projects is to support heritage whenever heritage is in need. And within that, we try to not take any positions in terms of which side of the conflict the heritage finds itself on. And then there's a number of principles that we try to apply in the selection of projects and when we look at the overall portfolio, and that has a lot to do with diversity, promoting diversity, making sure diversity can continue or can be brought back into a certain extent. It's about, especially in post-conflict situations, making sure people who had to flee or who were persecuted may over time feel welcome again in a certain place, for which there is a need, for instance, to rebuild monuments that were deliberately destroyed. It is about allowing for memory of the past, so to not do away with what once has been there, but also memory of the recent past of the conflict and trying to see what you can do with communities in order to overcome what has just happened. And it is about making sure that multiple narratives can continue to exist also through that heritage. That meant for us that we realized relatively fast that we could not just sit in our office in Geneva and wait for people to send us projects, because that did not lead to the type of portfolio that we wanted. That very often meant we got projects from either international organizations, which we are happy to work with, but that cannot be the only ones. It also meant that we get a lot of proposals from those with the strongest voices, which in post-conflict societies is often a problem. If you want to bring diversity back, you also have to listen to those who are not the ones with the strongest voice. So it meant we had to leave our office. Sometimes we have to go to the areas where we work and actively look for projects in order to have a portfolio that's better balanced, that's really about diversity. For instance, in Iraq, we have a big Yazidi project, for instance, where we work on reconstruction, rehabilitation of a variety of shrines, where we support the revival of specific traditions that existed around these shrines. It also meant that along the way, and especially I think from the start of the war in Ukraine, we have been working on more mechanisms to be able to respond faster, even faster than we did, because we had a 3-month turnaround cycle, which I think for a donor is quite fast, but in active conflict was not fast enough. And so we've developed new systems along the way, and today we have methods, mechanisms that allow us to provide funding within 48 hours, which means that, you know, other than just bringing diversity back, and I just heard somebody say it's better to prevent than to cure, and I think it's within the same mindset. It's better not to lose your heritage than to lose it and then to need us to rebuild it. That means not just the funding mechanisms, but also that as a donor you need the partners. We need partners who can operate on the ground, sometimes in very, very difficult circumstances. And that has meant for us also that we sometimes have to look outside of the traditional culture sector, because many of the heritage operators, other than sometimes very, very local NGOs, but many of the bigger partners, they are not present in humanitarian emergencies. So we've had to start working with humanitarian actors, for instance, which has allowed us to be more present in sometimes very complex situations.
Thank you, Dr. Zelter, for that thorough explanation. I definitely have more questions for following up, but I know that we're on time sensitive and we have run over with other panels. In respect to your time, is there any questions that you have? Yes, we have one. Anybody else? No, come on, please, a little, just one more question. Okay, we'll go with Jay, and then Jay, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Jay Kansara from Washington, D.C. My question is actually in regards to the recent developments in Bangladesh, where the government was overthrown by a popular mob, and unfortunately, the primary target was initially the Hindu community there, and their heritage sites, their houses of worship are being destroyed. But this government is, you know, at the helm of the government is a Nobel laureate. And how can the international community protect an indigenous community in a country where the globalist forces were very much against her? And unfortunately, a minority community is now at the receiving end of a mob-like situation. And
is this directed at anybody particularly? It's open for the panel.
I think anybody who wants to answer, but particularly the UN officials and maybe even Mr. Joshi, as he has expertise in the geographic region.
Just to be sure that I understood your question, what could the international community do when there is an internal issue facing any minority or a change of regime? That's it. Unfortunately, with the existing system, we see that we have many examples of failure of the community, international community, because the international community is traducing the power of some countries. When there is their interests, they can be useful. What they don't need, or it's not their interests, and that's why today we are speaking how to improve this multilateralism. I think the first thing, we are at the change and the reconfiguration of the world. We have some governance today, the international governance, which is not compliant with the reality, geopolitical new reality, and the economy. And all the conflicts that we are seeing today is maybe a translation of this difference between the reality and the organization. And I hope that we refound the value of the multilateralism, which consists to recognize the situation and to recognize all the people and to give the governance, the suitable governance, where we found as well the voice of minorities, of small countries, or small regions. And that's, I think, the challenge that we have today to be more efficient. But I don't like to be pessimist on that, just an observation. In many cases, we saw in the past that when there is a real commitment of the international community, they succeeded to stop genocides, they succeeded to stop conflicts, they succeeded. Today, we are in this divided world who is looking for his new print foot, and I think and I hope that all what we are doing, all of us, and this forum is a part of that, how we can see rising a new multilateralism system who can answer this question and who is more compliant with our reality today.
Mr. Joshi, and then State Secretary, if you would like to. No? Okay. Mr. Joshi?
Yeah. See, times of upheaval are times where such toxicity does prevail. And you are seeing a structure where the governance systems have kind of fallen apart. And in such times, no matter who is in control, there is a dissipation, there is going to be disruption. Now, how does the international community react is a very big question today, and that is a question we've all been grappling with. It's not being able to do much in any other geography either. So I think that is a moot question as to what should the international community be doing. But the important thing about Bangladesh is that if you start looking at how deep, it is not just about religion. There's a lot about culture. And in Bangladesh, there's one very important factor. There is a commonality of culture across the religious divide. A very, very, very important factor, which has actually, they sing the same Rabindra Sangeet. They even sometimes go to the same pandals. So there is a strong momentum within the community for bringing about healing. And at times like this, as I said, primarily, it is the communities which are going to bring healing. And what are the narratives? Dr. Selter spoke about narratives, spoke about history, what are the kind of narratives which are being propagated in that society, and what are the counter narratives to bring about that healing become extremely important. So if you all think that the international community can do something at the moment, I do not think they can.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Undersecretary General, and then if Dr. Selter or Ms. Tatikian would also like to comment.
I want to comment and to enlarge one of my remarks linked with your question about the sense of minorities. In our traditional way to address this need to protect minorities, everybody's in favor. You are a minority, you need to be protected. And when they are in danger, they are, an authoritarian regime, of course, the international community have to protect minorities. But let me be frank with all of you. That is the old traditional scheme, framework of the past centuries. I think humanity, international order have evolved. We are in 21st century. I think humanity have already, at least I hope, get to a mature ethic in order that recognize that every single man or woman is equal. And you put yourself as a minority, you put yourself in a disadvantage. Yes, because they are going to be protected, but will not be equal. Yes, we'll get some exception, but you are not going to be the same right of the majority. So it's an old concept. Today we have to evolve. We have to evolve for people that have equal right. Every single person have to have the right. And we talk about religion, or we talk about culture, or we talk about ethnicity, all we have the same right. So minority is okay in a transitional phase, but don't get used to be always minority. It's not good to be a minority, my dear friend. Minority are being persecuted. Minority are being, excluded. Minority have to recall them that I'm existing. Listen to me, I'm here. That's all thinking. We are in the 21st century. We have to ask our right as human beings. So, okay, protect, yes, but immediately after, ask for equal right for every single citizen. That is what the international community, the international organization, and UN, and my entity are trying to do. To defend every single man or woman to exert the right, either religious, belief, etc.
Ms. Tatikan or Dr. Selter, would you like to comment on this? And then.
Thank you. I think it's important to understand that people have basic rights and identity-related rights. So it's not all about having food and energy, and not even about feeling safe, although of course security and safety is a huge priority for small states, for unrecognized territories, and for minorities. However, there are identity-related issues, and here it's really difficult to understand how to ensure those needs without getting into this game of establishing hegemony or subjugating under the cover of integrating. You know, the term integration sounds really nice in the US and Europe. However, it can also be abused and misused to cover a hidden agenda. Like, to return to our conflict, to the Armenian context, where the situation last year when Azerbaijan was insisting that Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians should have no whatsoever self-governance status. So they were denied the status that in Western Europe different autonomies have, like in the same Spain, you know, Catalans have very high level of autonomy, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Corsica in France, and Azerbaijan suddenly said, oh, we are such an amazing country that we are not giving any self-governance rights to Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians, they need to be integrated. But what it meant? It meant subjugation and establishment and political hegemony over them, which could not work out. It was obvious, and that was one of the reasons that it led to total displacement of entire population. So I think we need to be very careful with all those terms and ensure everybody's rights in a way, proportionally, that that identity-related rights and dignity would be ensured as well.
Thank you, Ms. Tatikan. Dr. Seltzer, do you have a point? If you could just briefly mention, thank you.
Just very quickly, I mean, we are very hands-on, I guess, and within our own little niche of culture heritage, but as you definitely also know, whenever people are being targeted, it's never just about the people. It's about who they are and whatever represents who they are. And we're in Armenia here, people here know that very well too. And so the part that we can do is help protect that tangible part of who they are, their culture, their heritage, by, for instance, evacuating museum collections, bringing heritage to safety, whichever way that works. And I don't know Bangladesh particularly well. We're doing that today in Gaza. This is part of what we do, and I know this is not going to stop a conflict, and it's not even going to save a single life, but it is extremely important in the aftermath to have that part of your identity still existing, and we have noticed over time how important it is for people who are targeted to know that there is someone there to help them take care of their history and their culture, even if that is a very small part of everything they need at that moment.
Thank you, Dr. Seltzer. Just wanted to touch upon what Prime Minister Jomaa said and Undersecretary General. There was a quote that Foreign Secretary Jaishankar emphasized, and we're talking about institutions that should take responsibility, in examples such as Jay had mentioned, that there is a necessity for the United Nations to revitalize its policies, and suggesting that institutions must adapt to the evolving global landscapes. So in a world where political structures are shifting and multilateralism is being challenged, it is essential that we explore how intercultural dialogue can bring cultural divides, promote tolerance, and foster cooperation for people. Thank you so much. Applause for all of you guys for staying throughout the end. And Dr. Saran, thank you so much for having us.
No, thank you a lot. Thank you very much. And the panel was wonderful. Thank you for being with us. You're the brave people who stayed here through the day, so well done. You're there at the end of the line. We are going to begin tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the green room, and the conversations are going to be hosted in 2 rooms on the first and second floor, the green room and the white room. Look at your program booklet. Meet us there at 10 a.m. when we begin. Just want to end up with one thought as we close this very passionate panel. It's something that also was discussed in a few other panels, the world in churn and region in the, the peace and a crossroads. We have discussed this through the day. But I think the point made by Mr. Joshi, for example, was community is the cavalry. We have to do it ourselves. It's a do-it-ourselves project. It is not necessarily going to be endowed through some top-down mechanism. Communities will have to find ways of responding to it at one level. But also I think something that Manish Tiwari mentioned a little earlier in one of the sessions, that there is a role for multilateralism, and that role has to be rediscovered, because we cannot have patchy behavior from many of these institutions that act in certain instances and are absent in other instances. So multilateralism and the whole panel that we were discussing today was also a great discussion to think about culturalism. But let me just end with culture with something from the Indian G20 presidency, and something that we should all watch out for. In 2030, don't be surprised that when we create the next development goals, there is a culture pillar. Increasingly, communities are realizing that culture is economics, culture is sustainable development goals, culture is human existence. And you might be pleasantly surprised, and some might also be shocked, when culture becomes a pillar for any development agenda in the days ahead. Look at the Indian G20 document, look at what Brazil is doing, and follow what South Africa will do. Culture is going to become an integral part of policy making in the future. So intercultural dialogue is inevitable, and we started it today. So thank you to all of these wonderful panelists for having kick-started the discussion that is going to become most important in the time ahead. And have a great evening. It's a free evening. Enjoy yourselves. There are different dinners happening. I hope you find the right place. And we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.